So here we have 700 thousandths. We're going to find equivalent fractions with a denominator of 100 and 10, and then we're going to write 700 thousandths as a decimal. So, to find out how many hundredths that's equivalent to, we can use division. 1000 divided by 10 is 100, and when we're finding equivalent fractions, what we do to the denominator, we do to the numerator as well, and 700 divided by 10 is 70. So 700 thousandths is equivalent to 70 hundredths. Now let's find an equivalent fraction with a denominator of 10. 100 divided by 10 is 10, and 70 divided by 10 is 7. So that's equivalent to 7/10. So let's think about how we write this as a decimal. We can write 700 thousandths as 0.700 because the denominator of 1,000 says there'll be 3 digits after the decimal point, and we have 700, so the 7 needs to be shifted over to the tenths. But remember, 700 thousandths is the same as 70 hundredths, and we can write that as 0.70. The denominator of 100 tells us that we can use place values up to the hundredths place, so have 2 digits after the decimal point, and we have 70, so the 7 gets shifted over to the tenths. But that's equivalent to 7/10, which we just write as 0.7. So it's important to understand that because these fractions are equivalent, if we have zeros on the end of a decimal, we don't need to write them. That's because here, for example, 700 thousandths is equivalent to 7/10, and if you have zeros on the end of a decimal, it's always equivalent to a fraction with a smaller denominator. Now we have 70 thousandths. We need to find how many hundredths is that. Well, to get equivalent fractions, we can use division. So 1000 divided by 10 is 100, and 70 divided by 10 is 7. So 70 thousandths is equivalent to 7 hundredths. And let's think about how we write that as a decimal. If we're writing 70 thousandths, the denominator of 1,000 tells us that we can't go past the thousandths place, so we can have 3 digits after the decimal point. Because we have 70, the 7 gets shifted over into the hundredths place. But 70 thousandths is equivalent to 7 hundredths, and we write that as 0.07 because the second digit after the decimal point is the hundredths digit. So again, you can see that we don't need zeros on the end of decimals, because if we have zeros on the end of decimals, they're always equivalent to fractions which have a smaller denominator. So for this first question, we started with 700 thousandths, but we saw that that was equivalent to 70 hundredths. So here we've shown 70 hundredths place value counters. But remember, 10 hundredths can be exchanged for 1/10. So 70 hundredths is equivalent to 7/10, and that's why we can write it as 0.7. Then for the second question, we had 70 thousandths, so here we've shown 70 thousandths counters. But remember, 10 thousandths can be exchanged for 1/100th. So that's why 70 thousandths is equivalent to 7 hundredths, so can just be written as 0.07 without needing the 0 on the end.